Hello and welcome to HMG Live, a digital production of HMG Strategy. HMG Strategy is the super connector for technology leaders, creating an open dialogue between technology executives, their peers, and technology providers. HMG Strategy is the leader in researching global macroeconomic topics that are relevant for today's technology leaders. And now, live from Studio 1A at HMG Strategy Headquarters in Westport, Connecticut, today's host, lead principal and CEO of HMG Strategy, Hunter Muller.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon and welcome to those folks who are dialing in from the East Coast, and welcome to the folks that are coming in from the West Coast. Good morning. Hey, welcome to the HMG Multi-Cloud Executive Leadership Summit. Real excited to be here with you today. I think we have a world-class summit, truly a top topic, not only for the CIO, CTO, and CISO, the business, but clearly even a C-suite, and can be a boardroom issue, a boardroom idea as we struggle and work on layers of cyber, both in North America and a global level. Today's program will center around optimizing your multi-cloud environment to power today's digital business. As enterprise companies expand their use of cloud, they typically rely on multiple cloud providers to meet their needs and achieve greater redundancy and business continuity. Hey, it's never been a better time to be a technology leader, but never ever been a more challenging time to think differently, to lead courageously, to lead passionately, to drive for maximum performance in your in this work from anywhere environment, putting incredible demands not only on cloud but your infrastructure architecture as well as your IT teams doing an incredible job keeping the enterprise safe and secure. I'd like to introduce one of our great strategic partners, the president of the SIM Minnesota chapter, Tim Rolfing. Tim's the Senior Director of M&A at Technology Integration Portfolio Management at Hub International. Tim, welcome to today's Digital Summit.
Yeah, thank you, Hunter. Great to be here.
We're partnering with you over the years. We're big fans of SIM around the country and SIM International and Mark Taylor, and we love working with you folks in Minnesota.
Yeah, great. We love partnering with you, and we're continuing to move strong through this pandemic, and we're excited because next month we're going to start meeting together again.
You know, Tim, you'd probably agree, never been a more challenging time to be a technology professional, never more challenging time to be a business leader. What are some of your secrets professionally and personally on resilience and keeping yourself up and focused and positive, and your team up and focused, engaged and positive?
Yeah, that's a great topic. We have been trying to be very positive, inspiring trust, engaging the teams to be able to make their own decisions. I've found that that's helped going through this pandemic, especially as we've worked virtually. We stay in contact quite often, and it's challenging, but I think we've made ourselves stronger through this time.
Agreed, 100%. Hey, tell us a little bit about the SIM chapter.
Hey, our SIM chapter is doing great. We've got some new board members, a lot of energy, a lot of ideas. We've got some CIO panels coming up. We're going to be talking about coming out of COVID, what's next. We're talking about the Great Resignation and how we're dealing with that. We've got quite a few local CIO panels, and we're also collaborating with the national groups all over the country. So we've got some virtual events that way.
Tim, I understand you've been going 25 years strong. What's the secret to success?
I think it's just finding great board members, great networking opportunities, great ways to share ideas, successes, challenges. We're all in this together. We all seem to go through the same challenges, and we support each other. And so that's been the secret, I think, for SIM for so long.
So it includes digital meetings, now in-person meetings, of course, right? And how often do you meet?
Yeah, we meet monthly, and we've been going virtual like the last 18 months. We're going to start in a hybrid environment again back in April. I think, once we get back together, we're going to see a big influx of people coming back to our events.
Never been a more challenging time, Tim, but never been a more exciting time, as truly the tech leader, the CIO, CTO, and CISO have become the rock stars in the enterprise, right?
Oh, yeah. I think as soon as businesses realized how dependent they were on technology, and especially for these businesses that are working remotely, the technology part to hang them together, to keep them together, to keep the business moving, to keep the communication up has never been more apparent than now.
Hey, tell us a little bit about Hub International and your role there. Really a fascinating title.
Yeah, Hub International is a top 5 agency insurance brokerage out of Chicago. They originally started in Canada, and they're 22 years old, but $3.5 billion. We did about 80 acquisitions last year, and we're planning about 90 this year. So it's been fun. It's constant acquisitions and constant growth.
So you're leading the M&A of the technology stack, right? And managing the whole portfolio.
Yep. I've got the portfolio and the delivery capabilities. So once the sales guys sign the deal, my responsibility is to get the integrations done.
How interesting. Hey, anything else you'd like to leave us regarding the Minnesota chapter, and how can people get in touch with you?
Yeah, feel free to reach out to me. You can look on our website, on the CIM Minnesota website. Our board members are there. You can see all our events. We've got some great events coming up with a lot of CIO panels. If you want to try us out, come try us out for 1 or 2 events, and then feel free to join. But that's the best way to get a hold of us is through our website.
Great stuff, Tim. Hey, thanks for coming on today's program, and thanks for being such a supporter. And I'm a big fan of CIM International and CIM Minnesota.
Thanks, Hunter.
Next few months.
Yep.
Great. Again, challenging time to be a technology executive, a business technology leader, but never been a more interesting time, a more opportunistic time. I'm passionate and very bullish around business, around technology, around you, the technology executive, the technology leader. We're studying here at HMG Strategy what matters most to make you successful in the line of business, in the C-suite, in the boardroom, with your partners, leading your organization fearlessly, passionately, and courageously, inspiring trust, inspiring teaming, inspiring high performance, and keeping connected in a safe and secure enterprise. Just today, on CNBC, a top official for the U.S. government was talking about the #1 issue in the world right now is cyber. So, there's so much to unpack here today in our multi-cloud summit. I want to introduce our first fireside chat. We're privileged and really fortunate to have Ernest Boy here today. Ernest is the Managing Director and Chief Architect Cloud Engineering Platforms at American Airlines. I'm sure we all know that. And we're going to talk about developing the right mix of multi-cloud skill sets for your world-class team. Ernest, welcome to today's summit.
Good afternoon. Good morning to everybody.
Great to see you, my friend.
Nice seeing you.
Thank you so much for coming on today's summit and offering to kickstart us here. Hey, Ernest, a little context. We all know American Airlines, but how do you like to describe the scale and the size of the operation, both in North America and wide?
I mean, it's the world's largest airline, and it's massive, right? When you think about what we've got to account for, it's not just getting customers and from point A to point B, and in many cases point C, right? It's trying to do all of that, helping our customers on their journey, right? And at the end of the day, it impacts not only the customer, but also impacts the fleet, and ensuring that we have a good mix, we have a good alignment. It's moving. It's almost you can't even fathom it. The aspect of trying to align what the customer needs, the luggage, the baggage, the how to get the pilots in the right place, the flight attendants in the right area, and so forth, and putting that whole thing together. You get a frequent change of weather impact, anything, and you got to rework all of that. You got to do that immediately, right? Because you want to have the minimum impact to the customer. huge.
An amazing career, Ernest. Thanks for the setup there. Tell us a little bit about some of the successful evolutions of your career and how excited you are now to be at American.
Yeah, I mean, I've focused on architecture, really building the right platform, the right capabilities, ensuring that at the end of the day, irrespective of the industry, I've been in travel hospitality quite a while. But I think the focus has been, and then I spent obviously some time in telecoms, but the focus has been, how do you ensure that you're building the right architecture, the right way in a manner that you can deploy it where you need to deploy it? That's really the essence, right? You've got to mix that with emerging technologies. How do you ensure that it is relevant, that the technology is not driving you, but your business goals and objectives are what are determining what technology you use? I think in many organizations, sometimes we get that, that kind of dichotomy and that kind of challenge of who's driving who. You got to be very, very clear on your mission. You got to be very clear on what you want to accomplish, and then you got to use the technology skills and the obviously the people skills that you have, the technology and the tools and the people skills to enable the ultimate business objective.
Interesting. Today's summit is all about multi-cloud. Yep. And when we think about multi-cloud, let's at a high level, let's just give a professionally or a college kind of definition of multi-cloud. How would you define it?
Well, I think at the end of the day, it's the direct description of that is from a purist perspective. Where do you want to run your workloads most effectively and efficiently? Which cloud provider do you ultimately want to run that on, right? And ultimately, I think a multi-cloud strategy is critical to that. You've got to look at, many organizations though, kind of look at multi-cloud. They usually have an objective, right? The objective is usually they're thinking about resilience, or they're thinking about portability, or they're thinking about cost. That kind of influences their multi-cloud strategy. But the purest definition is workloads that can run effectively and efficiently on a cloud provider.
And when you think about developing a holistic strategy, thinking with the end in mind, right? 6, 12, 18, 36 months out, thoughts on how best to architect that strategy?
So I'm not going to go back to the three things I mentioned: resilience, portability, and cost, right? So if your objective is resilience, you've got to begin to sit back and consider really, what you mean by that. If you've architected and built the application right, there are multiple ways to get resilience. It's always great to have a multi-cloud strategy that allows you to say, here is where I'm going to invest. Here are the alternate cloud providers that I may use, right? It's never good to just kind of go 100% in one thing, right? So what I call, many organizations go with this term primary cloud provider. They may have a multi-cloud strategy, but they'll have a primary cloud provider where they'll do a lot of investments in there, because obviously every time you have more than one cloud provider, you create complexity. How do you deal with CI/CD? You create additional expense, maintenance, all the nuances associated with container and orchestration solutions that you got to deal with, and the fact that you still have to build a support organization for that, and obviously security implications. But you don't want to say everything shall go here and only here. So if you have a primary, you can focus on say, we're going to focus on this platform where we have workloads that are not ideal for this platform. We will consider and look at other cloud providers. That's actually the right way to do it. And if you then look at it, then resilience has a completely different perspective, right? You have the ability to use availability zones, regions to create the resilience. If you've architected your application right, sure, you can use that primary cloud provider and deploy it and create the resiliency you need. Most of them have it. If you have a unique circumstances where you actually need two cloud providers, then you go there. As I shared, that comes with cost and expense and other things, but sometimes it's worth it. Some use cases that are maybe, real edge, city on the edge, and use cases that they don't have a lot of database because they usually a lot of edge compute and so forth, they may make a lot of sense. So I think it really depends. The next thing organizations also look at is portability. Sometimes they go down the multi-cloud and go, hey, I'm going down this path because of portability. Portability is it's important, but you got to weigh up, right? CaaS, containers, versus PaaS, platform as a service, right? So you got to look at those and say, when do I use PaaS capabilities? Some PaaS capabilities, you don't have a choice. If you're in a cloud provider and you want to do, serverless, you really don't have much of a choice. You're going to use a PaaS capability. But sometimes you're able to say, no, I don't use this PaaS capability. I'm going to focus on container, right? There are standard open source containers out there. I think we all know them that we can. So you've got to kind of weigh the two and then address that from a portability perspective. But if it's important to you, when you go to your cloud and you pick that primary, you can determine which cloud services or cloud capabilities to use per the cloud platform that you pick. And then obviously the final thing I mentioned was cost, right? And I talked a little bit about this. You're not really gonna make a cost case from what I've seen in my past between one cloud by having multiple cloud providers. Even if you reduce and say, I have a better cost per hour, or per compute on one cloud provider, by the time you invest in the capabilities across, say, 3 cloud providers equally, you would have eaten up into that cost, right? So that's where you need to go back and begin to focus on that primary cloud provider versus the kind of the other ones that they're kind of niche for specific workloads.
Thanks, Ernest. When you think about your peers in the across the IT organization, those relationships are key. How does it work when you're in a high-performing team? When do you know it's working, and how do you make it a high-performing team?
I think it has a lot to do with really the culture. I think at the end of the day, we're all going through some degree of transformation. You've got to ensure that you have the right change agents in the right place. You have that engineering mindset. Cloud is changing, right? You've got to manage the traditional infrastructure teams, what they do, and how you transition them, how you create and build new capabilities within those teams so they can be kind of I guess they can enable the cloud, right? But it's also important that one of the things that makes cloud really, really important for organizations is the fact that they don't have a traditional gatekeeper. You gotta have the right level of governance. You've got a right level of observability to understand kind of what's going on in the cloud even before it happens, so you can kind of be more predictive, right? But you also have to enable. And I think that's typically hard for traditional platform organizations, teams that are focused on providing a service. The job definition changes, right? And I think that's critical in trying to get the right team, the right mindset to begin to provide training, additional capabilities, and have the teams begin to see the art of the possible. It's all in how you approach it. I think it's critical to having a successful transformation.
And then, Ernest, you're making big bets on big players, big companies. Share with us some of the secret formula on how to make a relationship strong, a true partnership with your cloud provider versus a vendor-partner relationship.
I think it starts with trust. It starts with, also being very clear about what your objectives are. At the end of the day, our cloud providers become an integral part of our ability to deliver the service to our customers, irrespective of whether they're external, internal, you name it. And I think really having a very clear understanding of what's the expectation, and then continuing to communicate at the senior level. I don't know whether it's a quarterly leadership update, but you've got to keep that conversations going, and you've got to ensure that there's a way to measure success. Actually, that's the other one, right? It's what are the attributes that that are important to your organization, and how do you measure them and hold everybody accountable? There are things that we need to do, on the organization side to ensure that, we're within the spirit, just like on the cloud provider side, that they're also within the spirit. And then measuring it allows us to also be able to then say, okay, Where are the gaps? Where are the opportunities? And the other thing, huge, celebrate success. We forget that. It's very easy to always focus on, oh yeah, I got this problem, I got that problem. But when things work well, celebrate success.
Great insights. Love it. Thank you. Hey, Ernest, when you think about managing costs, any lessons learned?
Know what's coming, know it every day. I mean, look, there's a proactive and a reactive, right? I talked about observability. Observability is going to help you understand what's happening from a cost perspective, even not just cost, system stability, what's everything. It's going to give you those insights. You've also got to have the right architecture and patterns for cloud, right? You've got to work with the cloud provider, that relationship, to ensure that you're creating the right architecture, the right compute. Are you sizing things properly? Are you even from a, I talked a little bit about making sure that your workloads are running in the right cloud. Some workloads work better in one cloud versus the other, period, end of story. And I think having that, being able to have that clear path, so you can also communicate that to your selected cloud provider to say, hey, this really doesn't work here, so we're going to do X, Y, and Z. That's really transparent, right? And then I think, wherever possible, use some of those tools that the cloud providers provide you with, things like reserved instances, right? They are going to help you manage your costs significantly. So those are the kind of the proactive steps you can take. On the reactive step, it goes back to governance and, again, observability and metrics. You've got to be able to act and react quickly. If something goes wrong and suddenly you see some cost that's gone straight through the roof, I mean, these things add up very quickly. You got to be able to turn around and be able to shut it down, or be able to figure out what you need to do with it. Otherwise, you wait a month, you'll see a shocking bill, right?
Great stuff, Ernest. Got it. A man who speaks from experience. I see that very well. Hey, when you think about skill setting and upskilling your employees, any lessons learned, tools, or techniques that you can share with us today?
Yeah, we partner very closely with our cloud providers. I mean, as we go into cloud, it's not just from our platform teams, but actually from our development teams. There is an awful lot of great content. All cloud providers have them. That allow you to really upskill your team, not just pure certifications, but actually practical examples, right? I think being able to partner with them to ensure that you make that available to your team, and some of them, there are multiple mechanisms. Some of them are 100% online. Some of them are, they'll come to your organizations and actually do training and so forth, or you'll go there. So I think there's a combination of tools from a training perspective that you can do to ensure that you kind of build in the skill set. The other thing you can do is also, have them, the cloud provider, play a key role in your architecture and kind of looking at what you're building and when you're building it all, almost an extension of to your team, because I think that's going to help also with the training and ensuring that things are being built correctly. And again, accountability. I keep coming back to that because I think that's important. Folks understanding what the expectations are and what's important and how they're going to be held accountable. I think it's important. It's a win-win the way I see it.
Hey, great stuff, Ernest. Any final parting thoughts, closing comments?
No, I mean, it's great to be here. Definitely, there's a lot in the space. We continue to make good progress. As you probably said at the beginning, there is a lot that we still need to move. Our journey has been pretty successful. There's still some more that we need to do to be where we need to be, but we keep evolving and trying to reach out for what's next and what's possible.
One last final question, Ernest. Brief answer only. How do you measure success and how do you report it out? What are the metrics?
I mean, I think it depends on what we have several metrics that we measure, whether in terms of response times, MTTR, MTTD, all sorts of. There are multiple ways you can measure, deployment times, all sorts of attributes. I think it depends on who the stakeholder is. Sometimes cost, efficiency, operational efficiency. I think you've got to put that together though. It's critical to have. That's how you measure success, right? What are the attributes that matter to you? What are your goals and your objectives once you've set them up? And who are the key stakeholders? Because different folks, business folks have different metrics of interest than the IT folks. So I think once you determine those things, it's pretty much set.
Hey, great to have you on today's Digital Summit. We will be live April 4th and 5th in Dallas. We'd love to have you come out to the dinner on the 4th, attend the summit on the 5th. We'll be there live with Stephen M. R. Covey launching his new book. I'm sorry, on 5th, 6th, and 7th of April.
Well, thank you. It's great being here. Have a great afternoon.
Super. Thanks.
Thank you.
Hey, for today, in order to make today happen, we have two great partners, Aviatrix as well as Fortinet. Please go to, in the Engages platform, the sponsor pavilion, and stop by and learn more about their products, services, and solutions. We'd really appreciate it. I'd appreciate it, and it keeps us moving forward in this with these digital theme summits as we go live here shortly in a few weeks in early April. Hey, next up, we have our first panel session of the day. I want to introduce Lane Patterson. Lane is the CEO of Patterson Technologies and former VP of Global Network and Edge Infrastructure at Yahoo. His panel, Optimizing a Multi-Cloud Environment to Power Today's Digital Business. Lane, welcome to the digital stage, and welcome to your panel.
Hunter, why don't you go ahead and start the panel?
Love ad libbing. Apologies. Panelists, please, turn your cameras on, if you will. We have Fred Harris, Head of Cybersecurity Risk, Data Risk, and IT Risk for Societe Generale. Zach Hughes, VP of IT Development Operations at CHS. Ooh. And John Jacobs, Field CISO at Fortinet. John, great. And my good friend, Wendy Pfeiffer. Wendy Pfeiffer is the CIO of Nutanix. Welcome.
Hi.
Think about kind of the high-level topic of optimizing a multi-cloud environment to power today's digital business. You know, John, why don't you kick it off for us? Being a field CISO at Fortinet, you see a lot of architecture, a lot of cloud scenarios. What's the primary method that you see being selected for cloud access on ramp and or services being bundled at the edge or centralized?
Sure. Yeah, thanks, Hunter. I appreciate it. And thanks again for having me. Glad to be here. And so, I wish there were one simple answer. I wish there were one, this is what people are doing. What I find and what we do have in conversations are really the reality that it depends on the organization and the organizational skill set. So the organization is relatively easy, and I'd say that's almost that's a split that's easy to make. If you're a very large distributed retail, people tend to look for a more convenient way for accessing cloud, multi-cloud. If you run a large enterprise and it's less facilities, maybe more focused on now work from anywhere, that sort of shifts the priority to probably the enforcement point versus simply just getting people access. And I think the second part of that being the bundled services, another really interesting part, the message I like to portray and convey is it really depends on the skill level of your organization. If you have the organizational skill set, some people have chosen to invest in that or been able. There's a tremendous benefit to building customized systems and tools and manipulating where those services lie. If you haven't, for whatever reason, whether that's financial or the business directive, we then see more of a prepackaged sort of services on delivery, basically comparing to infrastructure as a service versus platform or a full-based SaaS solution. So we do see a good mix. I would say the trend is shifting towards centralizing the security services. I don't think the on-ramp trend is really one that we could point in a clear direction, but hate to say that, but it depends, and we love to talk to people about how to fit that best into their environment.
On follow-up, can you outline some of the primary security concerns with multi-cloud?
Yeah. I mean, really, I think the number one is consistency. The cloud providers themselves are doing a great job as we're moving the bar up and up. They are as well. They build some tools that are native tools that are very effective. The primary concern we hear is if we're choosing multiple cloud vendors, which is often the case now based on either cost or relationships, contracts, whatever that is, being able to say we have a consistent security posture, from cloud A to cloud B, and more importantly, between cloud A and cloud B. So that really has become a trend that we've seen in the last maybe 12 months that's picked up exponentially.
Thanks, John. Let's go over to Fred. Fred, you there?
Yeah, Hunter, how are you?
Great to see you. When you think about managing complexity and ensuring regulatory compliance, I mean, I can't think of a more complex scenario than your role right at one of the larger global institutions.
Yeah, it's it's a problem that we faced with on-prem solution for years, right? And we've done some pretty innovative things. So the first being we worked very hard to map all of our existing technology, cybersecurity controls to our laws, rules, and regulations and our standards and policies. So we're able to quickly identify when we potentially have a compliance issue. Then the trick is how do we extend that out to the myriad of controls across multiple cloud providers, right? And it's having that same kind of rigor as you extend out and ensuring that you don't have gaps. And one of the biggest mistakes that we see is the application of the granular controls at the public cloud providers. They do a really good job at the top level, making sure that they have the right trust and control framework, but then ensuring that it's applied properly for each different offering in the public cloud creates a challenge for us.
Cybersecurity risk, data risk, IT risk. How do you sleep at night?
Like a baby. I wake up every 2 hours and cry.
Really good.
No, it's a lot of work. It is, and it's not only being aware of my jurisdictions within the Americas, which is where I'm predominantly responsible for, but also understanding the potential impact on the global bank and the things that I need to work with my peers in the rest of the world to ensure that we have a good global model for this dynamic.
You know, when you think of scale and size, the scale and size that you're operating is insane or unbelievable. How do you look at it?
I mean, it is insane, but we try to keep it simple, right? So making sure that we have very strong governance models that can scale up, down, both vertically and horizontally, and so that we can really apply the same methodology, at least on how we treat this, to everything else. So we actually try to make the governance simple and then apply a simple governance structure to an extremely complex problem.
Great, thanks. I'll circle back to you in a minute here, Fred. Hey, Wendy, over to you. When you think of cloud, what are you thinking about, and where do you see the opportunity for the business and for IT?
Yeah, I think first of all, it's great getting to go after these guys because what's happening here is we're talking about cloud as a consumption choice, and most of us are consuming both multiple public cloud infrastructure and on-premises infrastructure. And so as we're trying to optimize, what we need is an optimization model where we're consuming these hybrid environments in a cost-effective, secure, manageable, scalable, visible way. So it's sort of IT 101 applied across all of these different consumption choices. And when I think about the key elements that are important for my organization, these are things like being able to do software-defined things, being able to call infrastructure as code, being able to have logical runbooks that run cybersecurity the same way, no matter whose cloud I'm consuming, being able to have containerization technologies, and thinking about the services that we're running as running inside those logical containers or those logical modes. So for me, it's all about developing that mindset and then the associated skills in the team to operate in a hybrid cloud mode everywhere we operate. The more we can reuse code, the more we can reuse our operating model everywhere we operate, then the more flexibility we have to change up our consumption as conditions change, as we need more capacity, or as prices change, or as technological needs change. And so that's a real focus here, I think, that I'm hearing in everyone's feedback is it's really about how we operate these technologies. And that's right at that center, that intersection of IT, that intersection of the best technologies and the best operating principles applied to solve these business problems.
Wendy, beautiful answer, love it. In this global event that we're all going through, on whatever level you want to talk about, how has your leadership style evolved, and how have you become a better leader, learning more about the world and being more empathetic in general? I'm just guessing, but we all have become more empathetic and learned to be that way in this global crisis, right?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things. The first is that we need to understand that as a leader, we are influencing people asynchronously. Not everyone is in the same place at the same time. And so this means that I need to create messages and directions that are clear, that are resilient to some of the frictions that come from changing of work modes, that I need to be able to document and write and create content and directions that can be interpreted in different time zones and by different folks. And it also means that I need to be open to providing clarity without specificity. If I provide clarity of mission or direction, then I'll need to rely on folks in different modes to get specific as to how they execute. And ultimately, for me as a leader, I have to become better at using new tools and new technologies and be more open to different ways of interpreting and different ways of doing things, a lot more listening, and frankly, also a lot more intersection between business and technology. So I need to be more adept at understanding business conditions and business messaging and translating that into technical capability. So, I will say, sort of it's pouring new wine into the old wineskins. It's sort of a self-transformation as well as a digital transformation.
Good stuff, Wendy. Thanks so much. Love the answer. Hey, over to Zachary. Zachary, when you think of power outages, and let's call it just outages in general, you've been affected. We've all been affected. Do you have a story that you want to share with our audience here at today's summit?
Yeah, thanks, Hunter. I do. And I think when people think about multi-cloud resiliency, there's nothing like a big public cloud provider outage to kind of get that back on everyone's mind. So I do have a kind of a short, brief story to share. I think everyone kind of remembers early December 7th to be specific, that Amazon had their East Coast region outage, which was the largest outage they had in over 4 years. It also happened to coincide with our go live date of SAP S/4HANA in AWS, which was years in the planning. So if anyone's been through an SAP deployment knows that there's a lot of wind up to that. So to have that coincide with our go live date was certainly added some panic to our day. Well, we'll share just kind of how it worked out for us, though. It really wasn't as bad as for us as it was for so many other entities. Some of the nature of the workload, as well as some of our preparedness for it. SAP runs on a lot of EC2 instances, and by and large, a lot of those EC2 instances were undisturbed. What you lost during that outage was visibility and control to change your environment via consoles or APIs or other means. And it just so happens that we had done a pretty decent job of sizing the environment, so we could go through our go live day without having to make any adjustments. And it didn't actually impact our end users, even though it made engineering at all levels absolutely crazy because we were kind of going through a big go live event during this kind of global catastrophe. So we did make it out through the other end. There's always things to consider in the context of, wow, should we be in AWS and also Google and also Azure and maybe some other place, and keeping the data centers around. There's always, you can always overreact to a situation. I think it's really practical to look at the specifics and look at the needs. Of course, we have multiple availability zones, within a region that we can operate within. We had the ability to fail over to the West Coast if we needed to. That was all lined up, ready to go and tested. But we didn't need to pull the trigger. We didn't need to complicate things for end users because the outage really was not impacting our business as much as it was just impacting IT administration at the time. So I think there's some overreaction at times to kind of things that kind of garner a lot of press to really how enterprises should think about and respond to those things. We're taking a very pragmatic approach. We are multi-cloud. We have workloads in various clouds. Kind of like Ernest suggested, we have a primary cloud from an infrastructure as a service standpoint, while we do leverage lots of best of breed technologies at both the SaaS and the PaaS layer from multiple providers.
Zachary, a little bit about CHS, a little context. What industry, what business size, scale?
Yeah, CHS, we're a $38 billion global agriculture and energy cooperative. We're actually the largest farmer-owned cooperative in the United States, based in the United States, that we operate globally. We have employees in about 20 countries. We export grain to over 60 countries. That's our global footprint and operations. We have about 10,000 employees, and we operate traditional data centers that we're eventually moving out to various cloud providers, and we're well into that journey.
Stuff. Where are you based out of?
Based out of the Twin Cities.
Super. Love it. Thanks, Zachary. A little bit about Fortinet. What makes Fortinet uniquely different in our world?
Yeah, well, great question. We've been around for 21 years. We've not been a traditionally heavily marketing focused company. That's changed in the past couple of years. We have grown year over year, tremendous rate, and almost all of that is based on organic growth. So we're not, a technology company that's looking to make, we buy up a brand new technology and try to smash it together. We've been strongly promoting a security fabric, which is mirrored and echoed by Gartner and other analysts. The idea that these solutions are becoming more and more complex and more ubiquitous in location. So they've got to communicate and work together. So we've got our own suite of products. Currently, I believe it's just over 50 products. So we cover about everything there is in security, everything down to physical layer and OT, all the way up to cloud virtual instances. So really, we think that's a fundamental differentiator. Being able to both integrate and control that from a central point and provide consistency across every infrastructure.
Excellent. And John, we like to cover career and leadership a bit here at HMG Strategy. Pride ourselves. What are some of the key decisions you made in your career advancement to have such a successful ascent?
Yeah, thank you. And I would say number one is, and I say this in the hiring practice, I think it's the one attribute that you cannot teach, you cannot add later. But during an interview, I always suggest people look for one thing, and that is be constantly curious. And this industry is changing so quickly. We can come up with different reasons and measurements, but we all know it is. And being constantly curious and constantly wondering what that is, how does it work? How can you dissect it? That started early in my career, just, I guess, dating myself to when, PCs weren't even that popular, and carried it. One big change I made was moving from the networking space to security dedicated. And I think about 10 years ago, and that was a big shift. Networking is ultimately important, but as you see the trend move to where the complexity lies, I think it's important to follow that same trend line. And I encourage people to do that. What's the next interesting thing? And then bind yourself to it, and fun things happen from there.
Stuff. Any insights on what's next?
I think energy, without question, it's on everyone's mind, and how you word that, whether that's a corporate initiative or whether that's some personal mission. I think renewable energy, I mean, that's a transition we're going to make as a society, the rate of which is completely debatable, and it's not a switch. I think that's one. And then I think exploration. I'm a huge fan of not necessarily the tourism part, but I do think, transportation, hypersonic transportation, rocket launches, things of that nature. And that will bring with it, probably not the answer you were looking for, but that will bring with it a lot of technology that is enabling those industries. So what those are specifically, I think will to be determined. That shifts a little slower. I think we're living in a hybrid world where now cloud and everywhere is the norm, multi-cloud and multi-user. So where that moves next is, I think, to be determined at this point. But for the next 2 to 3 years, this is sort of the trend we're seeing now.
Stuff, John. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Over to Fred. Hey, Fred, when you think of managing cyber in a multi-cloud environment, how do you manage it? How do you measure it? How do you report up the cyber aspect?
Yeah, so thanks, Hunter. It's a complex problem, right? Right now, cybersecurity is a focus at the board and at the C-suite level, right? So you have to go in multiple times a year into your board and give very clear messaging about your cybersecurity posture and your trust and control framework. It's ensuring that you're meeting all of your, at minimum, regulatory requirements, but also protecting your firm and its customers, and being able to demonstrate that in very, air quote, kitchen English ways to non-technical people, so that they're able to consume it, right, is really the key. When you bring in multi-cloud into the equation, it's being able to tell the story regardless of the cloud environment, right? So being able to say, listen, we have the same trust and control framework applied across everything. And yes, the underlying controls in the way that which we have the cybersecurity controls are different in each environment, but they ultimately result in the same outcome, which is the protection of our customers and the firm.
Great stuff. Same kind of question as I gave John, is career ascent, key moves and things that have worked for you over the years.
Yeah, I think the first is being cognizant of the fact that your ascent is not a ladder, it's a lattice. So sometimes willing to be laterally moving and willing to shift direction and to allow yourself other opportunities to present themselves for ascent. And I think the other one would be, sometimes it's as much about the opportunities you don't take advantage of as the opportunities that you do. And sometimes when something doesn't just feel right, trust your instincts. Don't always, if there's a doubt in your mind about a particular move, but everything else about it is attractive, trust your instincts, and they will put you on the right path.
Great stuff. Love it. Thanks, Fred.
Thank you.
Over to my good friend, Wendy. Wendy, it seems like we've been on the cloud journey now 10 to 15 years, or maybe more, depending on how you define it, right? Or who defines it. Always learning more, always learning new things every day, every year.
Yeah, actually, what's great about this cloud journey is that it's both technology driven. We have capabilities today we didn't have 10, 15 years ago, but it's also necessity driven. We have this tremendous scale. We were talking about the fact that it's a hybrid world that we're a part of now. And when we think about hybrid world, hybrid education, hybrid, attendance at offices, et cetera, what we're talking about is the blending of technologies across multiple sectors. Here we are speaking to one another virtually over public internet. I'm using my work computer and my gaming monitor and camera to speak with you. So we've got this blend of technologies, capabilities. Into our workforce comes a blended group. We've got Gen Z entering the workforce, the first digitally native generation. And so as we're looking at what cloud needs to enable this flexibility, these multiple endpoints, these very complex cybersecurity models, and it needs to do so at a scale and at a simplicity that also extends to on-premises. So we're always pushing the envelope with these cloud technologies and this model, and we're always sort of reinventing why we're using cloud and multi-cloud. And we're finally at the point where we have this optionality as well. So it's you know, for me, it's endlessly fascinating.
Stuff. Do you get uplift? Do you get lift and energy from it, or drag?
Totally get lift and energy from it. You know, I think if you're a tinkerer like I am, then, you know, having an ever bigger workshop to tinker in is just an absolute pleasure. And I would say as well, you know, just at our core, the more that we can be hungry, the more that we can be humble, the more that we can be honest, is the more that we can continue to adapt and ingest new technologies and apply them to the problems in the world and in our businesses. And so I like to try to stay in that space as much as I can.
Great stuff, Wendy. Good to see you. Thanks so much for being part of today's summit. Let's circle back over to Zachary. Zachary, when you think about DR, disaster recovery, how does it play out with a multi-cloud scenario? Kind of interesting, right?
It does, and it's a little different based on how we traditionally think about it. But certain concepts certainly still come to bear. You know, traditionally organizations maybe had a primary data center and they had a cold site somewhere else. They maybe had it under contract, or maybe they owned it and it was a long distance away to trying to get a certain minimum distance, and there's a lot of cost and not a lot of value associated with that unless you actually had a disaster. Other organizations I've been a part of, we've done data centers that are more geographically close together, so you can take advantage of that low latency, actually use the equipment and have some resiliency at the same time. And in the cloud, you kind of get some of the best of both worlds with multiple availability zones in a certain region, and really having access to regions worldwide at your fingertips without having to contract with multiple parties. So all these things kind of take different turns. Certainly the kind of the resiliency, your backups still take a big play in everything. Certainly new threats of ransomware, certainly new threats of data security kind of change the landscape. You feel maybe a little less protected out in the public cloud than you would within the four walls of your data center. Though I would say if you do it right, you can actually achieve higher degrees of security with the modern cloud-based technologies than you could in your traditional technologies in your data centers. So just so many of the tactics and strategies kind of get a little bit more complex, get a little bit more nuanced. I would say one thing that kind of stays the same is the discipline to test and exercise and plan. There's just no kind of replacement for that. We've just continuously learning and making ourselves more resilient all the time. There's the happy path failures as well as the unplanned. Oh, well, it failed over, but it didn't fail over in the way I thought it would. So I didn't have the results I expected. How many times have we all heard that in our careers? So it's getting better at resiliency is a never-ending battle. I'd say cloud gives us more sophisticated tools and toolkits to do it, but the job kind of remains the same.
Zachary, thanks so much for coming on today's summit. Great job. Fred, John, Wendy, thank you again, all of you. Really appreciate it. Great job. World-class panel. Great session. I hope to see you again soon in person. We'll be in New York. You're welcome to come to any one of our live summits. We'll be in New York in May for a CISO event, as well as Silicon Valley in June. Great to see you all.
Yeah, great job. Thanks.
Okay, hey, next up we have Hamad Alam. He's the VP Solutions Architect at our good partner friends, Aviatrix. Hamad, welcome to the program. Good to see you.
Hey, thank you. Thanks for having me. It's a great session. I've been listening intently. It's amazing panels.
Content, thought leadership, right? We pride ourselves here at HMG Strategy on really bringing out the best in the professional executives that come on stage at on the digital theme summits or the in-person summits or advisory boards or research agenda, and having world-class companies like your company showcased here. Thank you so much for coming on and being part of today's summit. You know, just broadly speaking, who is Aviatrix? Who are you, and how did you, when were you started, and how did you come to be?
Oh, great question. A lot of questions there. So we are the biggest company that you haven't heard of if you are in infrastructure space. So if you think about in 90s, when data centers were built massively everywhere, and Cisco came out with the networking, network security, operational tooling that built the data centers of the past decades, Aviatrix is the equivalent of that in public cloud space. So essentially, when enterprises, and today we're talking about multi-cloud, which is great, but some of the stuff that earlier, as Ernest was saying, right? You got to pick up one cloud, and then you kind of go into the next cloud and the next cloud based on your business needs and whatnot. So what happens is when your enterprises are going into the cloud, the first thing that they need to set up is identity. You gotta set up your identity. You gotta set up how you will be identified and all that kind of stuff. And the second thing that you need to do is network. You got to build your network and build it in a secure way, build it in a way that it's operationally excellent and it's optimized for day-to operations. So, and that's exactly where Aviatrix comes in. So we've been around for around 8 years now. Before, at the time when people were just thinking about cloud, is it real? Aviatrix was thinking about, well, cloud is real for sure. But because our DNA is networking, what are the challenges that we would have in cloud, or enterprise would have in cloud? And we started building our product back in 2013, 2014, focusing on cloud networking. So right now, in the past year and a half, we are seeing real, enterprises moving aggressively in the cloud, not just the DevOps, pieces, but real enterprise IT moving in the cloud. And Aviatrix, with our networking, security, operational capabilities, are product ready, serving the clients in public cloud.
Stuff. When you think about the whole multi-cloud journey, how does Aviatrix accelerate that? It's a really fascinating technology that you have.
Yeah. So I'll give you an example. Talking to one of the Azure partners, they said that on an average, their Azure deployments for new customers are delayed between 12 to 26 weeks because of networking delays, right? So what happens is that we focus so much on applications, which is true. That's what's running the business. But the enabler for that, networking, is the real enabler, because when people go in the cloud, especially from a DevOps perspective or app teams perspective, who've never managed and run a network infrastructure in on-prem cloud, they don't know sometimes the complexity of networking. So you can start with one VPC, one VNet, or VCN, or whatever you have, and it all works out of the gate because it's simple. It's just one. But as we all know, networking is an n-square problem. So as you step up your infrastructure, the complexity is not linear and it's squared. So as you start growing your infrastructure, the networking becomes a bottleneck, right? So what Aviatrix does is we simplify networking. We run networking at the pace or faster than your application. So as you're building new environments, as you're onboarding new applications, and as you're moving from on-prem to cloud, or as you're connecting your branches to the cloud, or whatever you're doing in the cloud, Aviatrix is helping to make sure that the networking and this is agile. The security postures are baked in, not bolted on. It's not, hey, I'm doing security in this part of the network, send the traffic over there to do the security. Not really that, but baked into the network, in the network fabric, in a way that where there's eyes and ears into everything that's happening from a connectivity perspective. So what that does is it enables organizations to run faster, build faster, deploy faster. And then whether you're in single cloud or you're in multi-cloud, right? If you have a single repeatable architecture, it just simplifies everything. So at the end of the day, what happens is, we, the infrastructure people, we never make the decision of which cloud the business is going to use. The business makes that decision, right? Depending on whatever metrics they choose. It could be cost, it could be proximity, it could be regulation, it could be merger acquisition, it could be 10 different reasons, right? So the infrastructure never gets to make the decision about multi-cloud. They're told that we are in multi-cloud and you have to support it. So how Aviatrix enables it is our product and architecture works seamlessly in a repeatable manner in any cloud. So the way you do networking in AWS is the same way in Azure, the same way as GCP, same way as Oracle, same way in Ali Cloud. So from an infrastructure perspective, you're always ready to turn to business and say, all right, tell me where to go, we're ready.
Fascinating stuff. When you think of the skills gap in an organization in the multi-cloud scenario, how does Aviatrix help with some of this problem?
Yeah, so actually that's a fantastic question and with the twofold answer. And this is a question that a lot of organizations and even our system integrator partners are running into, skills gap. You have a ton of really smart people who, and again, I'm going to focus on networking, network security, who have decades of experience in on-prem networking. So it's not that they don't know how to do it, who do networking. They just don't know how to do it in cloud. And when it comes to cloud, you may have not one cloud, you have 2, 3, or multiple clouds. So what you need to do is you need to, number one, train and educate them on the new infrastructure they need to support, number one. And number two is you need to provide them the tools that they're familiar with, right? So those are the challenges that customers have. So when you're going in, even in single cloud, let's say you're going in AWS or Azure, it's a completely new way of doing networking. It's new terminologies, new APIs and everything. And then the tools that your networking teams or support or operations team are familiar with are not there. So it's a double whammy challenge for them. So what Aviatrix does is from the first point of training, we have a world-class certification and training program, which is called ACE, Aviatrix Certified Engineer. And what it does, it's focused on the infrastructure teams who are familiar with networking and security, but just don't know how to do it in cloud. So it takes them through a journey in telling them how networking the way you know it is done in AWS, is done in Azure, is done in GCP, done in blah. Once they realize, they understand that, then we tell them how it's done repeatedly with Aviatrix. So that's, and there are multiple tracks in there. So that's a very, very popular training track because it just cuts down on, otherwise you have to send your people to AWS training and Azure training and GCP training. So it's just massive, problem that we just simplify from a training enablement perspective. From the day two operations perspective, what happens is your operations team are not just supporting one thing. There are 50 or 100 products that they're supporting. So they don't have the skills or time to be the master at everything. So what they need is they need the tools that are common and that they're familiar with that can help them solve problems faster. So that's what Aviatrix brings. So from a day to ops perspective, our visibility tooling and platform is built in a way which is very intuitive, which allows existing NOC/SOC teams to be able to troubleshoot, visualize, deploy, expand environments very simply. So it's kind of two way of attacking that skill set problem.
Any other challenges that you can think of when implementing a multi-cloud strategy?
Yeah, so I think there are a couple of things. One is just awareness, right? So for example, a lot of enterprises have extensive investments in things like SD-WAN as an example, right? and they look at SD-WAN to solve their cloud networking problem. Similarly, they would have, connectivity providers like, Equinix or Megaport or others, and they are looking at these providers and players to solve challenges in the cloud. And I think this is critical to discuss here, because the way you need to look at it is, one thing is getting to the cloud. So, you need your Equinixes and Megaports or whatever you have to provide you connectivity to the cloud, or SD-WAN to bring you from on-prem to the cloud. But that's where they kind of stop, is getting you to the cloud. They don't really do anything for you in the cloud. It's like, your water main, right? The water main comes to your door, but then you still need your plumbing in the house to run the water, right? So similarly, what Aviatrix does is we do in the cloud networking, which is where the complexity is. And the rest, SD-WAN specifically, is taking you to the cloud. So just a little bit confusion in enterprises on who can do what is one of the things that I see is interesting. But over the period of time, I think that those things are getting clarified.
Thanks so much for coming on today's Digital Summit, and thank you for supporting us. Folks, you can learn more in the sponsor partner pavilion. Please go by both Aviatrix and Fortinet's booths, learn more there, support the event, support the summit. Hamad, final comments?
No, the last thing is, thank you for having me, and for all the CIOs and executives out there. Focus on getting your teams enabled. I think education is the best thing. If you want to try Aviatrix ACE training, that is, I would recommend as the first step. But other than that, education is the best thing, and let's get the team skilled up.
Great, Hamad. Looking forward to meeting you in person, maybe in New York or when I'm in the Valley. Thank you.
All right, thanks for having me.
We have Dutt Kalari. Dutt is the former Senior Vice President, Global Digital Technology Transformation at Broadridge. Dutt, always good to see you, my friend. Welcome. Envisioning and executing on the right multi-cloud strategy.
Hey, good afternoon. Good afternoon. It's a pleasure meeting you, and great to be part of the HMG Strategy Network. Again, it's great to be moderating this panel. We have a great team of panelists that are going to talk about envisioning and executing on the right multi-cloud strategy. Now, I call it the fit-for-purpose multi-cloud strategy. And the reason why we need a multi-cloud strategy has become very evident, especially all kind of SaaS solutions and SaaS opportunities that we are getting. So I have with me today an august team of panelists. Going to start with David Frazee, Vice President of R&D at 3M Corporation, the Corporate Research Systems Lab. David, nice meeting you.
Thanks, Dutt. Nice to be here.
So we're talking about envisioning and executing the right multi-cloud strategy, right? And when we talk about multi-cloud, we are talking about, public cloud, private cloud, and different types of clouds and inter-cloud, and you name it. You have got a lot of things to talk about it and unfold here, right? So my question to you is, as we start the discussions, right? What was the business reason at 3M? We understand 3M is a global conglomerate with multiple lines of businesses, multiple product lines, and I'm sure you have your hands full. What's the business reason why 3M went towards looking at a multi-cloud strategy?
I would say one of the maybe secrets of 3M that most may not know is that one of our biggest and fastest growing businesses is in health information systems, which by definition is data and solutions and essentially well suited to the cloud. But until I would say about 2015, it was still, I would call it on-prem / private data center managed. And thanks to a bit of a mini crisis around ICD-10, those of you in healthcare know what that is, transition, kind of a Y2K event. We essentially had to go all in to be ready for the transition to ICD-10. And hence I'm going to say, in a sense, didn't waste the crisis opportunity. And so the conservative nature of our company has always been maybe not leading in those kinds of technologies, but in that case, we did for the entire company, which then led us to, if you will, as I've heard some of the panelists already say, we didn't choose a multi-cloud environment. It was thrust upon us. So we went with AWS for our health information business, while the rest of the company was really a very, very traditional Microsoft shop. So we'd had essentially both channels or both paths going, which has led us to the dilemma or the opportunity, depending how you look at it, of there's a customer-oriented deliver to our customers who pay us for our services, as well as an enterprise essentially way. And those two used to be kind of very black and white. You're either on Azure for the enterprise, AWS for customers. But of course, as technologists are, we like to dabble in each other. So that's where we are today.
Wonderful. Thanks, David. I'll come back to you in a little bit. Let's go to Tim Dalkin. Tim is the Vice President of Information Technology at Johnson Brothers. Tim, tell us a little bit about Johnson Brothers.
Johnson Brothers, we are the 4th largest liquor distributor in the country. We operate in 27 states. We do wine, beer, craft beer, and spirits. We're also an international importer of fine wines for the US. So
wonderful. I know who to call for my single malt, right, Tim?
Yeah, correct.
So in that kind of an environment, Tim, what prompted you to think about a multi-cloud strategy? And what was the right multi-cloud strategy for you?
So if you're not familiar with the distribution business and the wholesale businesses in general, many of our applications that we use are third-party provided. So rather than continuing to have to manage all the on-premise infrastructure and do the things that we do to host it, manage it, patch it, all those things, it makes more sense for us to use some of those platforms as they mature and move them to the cloud. Our routing systems for our trucks is one great example. That's all being moved to the cloud, and that's working very well for us.
Wonderful. And a little bit about your background, Tim.
Oh, sure. So I've been with Johnson Brothers about 4.5 years. I've spent the majority of my career in technology. I've worked at companies like American Express, Thrivent Financial for Lutherans, Merrill Corporation, Harman International, et cetera. I've got a pretty varied background. I'm in charge of infrastructure and information security here at Johnson Brothers, and just really love being in the liquor business. I guess I could say it that way.
Oh, who won't love to be in liquor business, right, Tim? Thank you. I'll come back to you in a little bit. Let's go to Anil Saldana. Anil, you have a very interesting title of a Chief Cloud Officer. That actually talks volumes about the importance of cloud and the strategic view of cloud at Rush University Systems for Health. Enlighten us, right? What's going on from a multi-cloud strategy, and how are you adopting, or how are you forging into a multi-cloud strategy?
Yeah, sorry. Definitely. Basically, I was brought in, in the middle of the pandemic, in 2020. And, Rush has been a pioneer in innovation in healthcare. And we had started on a cloud journey pretty early on. And also as part of the pandemic, Rush, instituted the first a cloud-driven data hub for COVID for the city of Chicago. And, so Chicago being the third largest city in the US, we saw a fair bit of COVID in the early part of 2020. So in association with, the Chicago Department of Public Health, we built a cloud-driven data hub. In terms of this data hub, we collected data from more than like 30 hospitals in the city of Chicago, vaccination data from Illinois, and also federal, county, and state data sources all collected in one place. It was completely cloud-driven, and it kind of helped with disease surveillance and, in the pandemic response for the city of Chicago. So that's one of the stories we have in terms of cloud at Rush. When you come back to Rush, as a hospital or a health system that's been in existence for more than like 170, 180 years, and we are multi hospitals in the city of Chicago. So having been in existence for a long time, our entry into the cloud was just organic, and with also a lot of, innovation, research, non-operational side of the health system, and with a renewed push towards standards from the federal government, like FHIR and things like that. So it was kind of natural to embrace the cloud for not only the agility, but also to maintain, innovation and, advancement in healthcare, basically. So I was brought in basically to kind of shepherd the cloud transformation and also to manage the COVID data hub for the city of Chicago that I mentioned.
Great. Thank you, Anil. We'll come back to you in a little bit. Let's go to Steve Winterfeld. Steve is the advisory CISO at Akamai. Steve, with what's going on in the cyber world and the cyberspace, and with all the challenges that are coming in, managing the security on one cloud itself is becoming difficult. And now we are talking about a multi-cloud strategy, right?
So sure. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go ahead, Steve.
So I'll talk briefly on my background as well. I've got a chance to do work in defense contracting with some of the triple letter agencies here. Worked with the energy sector. Was the CISO for Nordstrom Bank and ran a lot of their infrastructure. I also worked at Charles Schwab's at incident response and threat intelligence. And then recently came over here to Akamai. Akamai's been a great place. Akamai started off with content delivery. Then they built a way to protect our customers' with web application and API and JavaScript protection. Protects employees through zero trust and the basic secure web gateway, and finally micro-segmentation to minimize impacts. And lastly, what you're talking about is our edge compute. And that's that function as a service. And it's where you're seeing, where we're very excited is following the customer's journey. We're seeing our customers more and more, having multi-cloud. And I wish it was multi-cloud. It's data centers. Some of our finance customers are still having mainframes. It's, multi-cloud because we have to respond to the business. We can't really drive where we're going. We have to collaborate with the business and make sure that we're working with them and protect them wherever they want to go. And so as we see all this going on, that's kind of the challenge we're focused on.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Steve. Now, let's do a little bit of deep dive because we started talking about the strategy of cloud, and then I also want to focus on the technology of cloud, then the economy of cloud, and the security of cloud. That's how I'm going to, lay this entire discussion out. So going back to you, David, from a technology of the cloud perspective, right? You have the public cloud, you have the private cloud, and you have the need to integrate it with data centers as Steve was mentioning about, right? Now, in this kind of an environment, and on top of that, when your business users in an organization like 3M have the ability to swipe a credit card and subscribe to, to a SaaS application and bring it in, you never know what cloud it is on, what kind of security parameters it's approaching and things like that. How do you go about defining the technology of cloud in that kind of an environment?
Yeah, my role at 3M, I'm on the, I'll say the R&D side. So our primary duty, of course, is to create new products for customers for sale. And as I alluded to a bit earlier, in the past, it's fairly easy to separate the R&D community from, I'll call it the traditional IT community, because our overlap and intersections were infrequent and often the same as most other functions in the lab or in the company. As you alluded to, the availability of SaaS and other tools that are both for, I would say, enterprise employees, but lab employees, has created a dilemma for our company. And so we've centralized a lot of that governance around that into one place where all the essentially governance approvals and so on have to be monitored. The issue that we get into, which is part of our essentially challenge of both the multi-cloud and this, I would call it almost a dual strategy from serving customers to serving employees, is what's right for the customer and their solution is not necessarily the same as what's right for the enterprise. And so you get into some policy and some other issues around how one governs that and decides what's best. And I simplify it this way. For the most part, the cloud and the technologies you want to deploy, like the new, obviously, AI services and serverless capabilities and so on for customers, is to provide new value to customers. On the enterprise, the very first thing they talk about is not technology, but cost. So we have this cost versus value debate that goes on constantly. And oftentimes that leads to the one, well, that cloud is cheaper, therefore, we want to go there, and this one has more features or more value, so our group wants to go there. So that governance is where we have a lot of room for improvement, but we've made some progress.
Wonderful. And a follow-up on that, David. You have early adopters, you have late adopters, you have people in different levels and stages of whether it is single cloud or multi-cloud or whatever, wherever journey they are, right? How do you influence these people to get off of where they are and move to the cloud?
Yeah, that's a good one. Again, in our company, because one doesn't have to go back very far to think of our differentiators being manufacturing and innovation and new technologies, and very little IT, I would call it, was information technology in general, is required for us to differentiate. And in the last 20 years, that the global economy, what customers expect from a company like ours, has changed a lot. We've tried a number of things to try to essentially engage, I would call it, the larger base of our employees to essentially kind of get on the bus, so to speak. What we found to work best actually is, and I'd love to say it was strategically planned, but it was probably more opportunistic than that, is we've had a number of global hackathons. And those hackathons have been partnered and supported strongly by both Microsoft and AWS in two different, we call them lanes. There's a learning hack lane and essentially a project hack lane. And both of the big suppliers bring experts, cloud services, training, all those kinds of things together. And so it's almost like this, let's have some fun with it, learn, make something interesting and new. And wow, I didn't know it was so easy kind of thing. And so we've had probably over the last 3 years, 2,500 individuals participate, of which half had never used the cloud before. And so we find that hands-on approach and have a little fun with it does a tremendous amount of getting people along the journey.
Wonderful. Thanks, David. Tim, in a specialized industry like yours, in the distribution space and the need for the right type of supply chain connectivities and things like that, right? There are I'm sure it comes with a lot of risks. So what are some of the risks that you assume in your multi-cloud environment or multi-cloud strategy, and how do you mitigate those, Tim?
Sure, that is a fantastic question. So our risk really comes in two forms. The first is operational risk, meaning, like I talked about our routing systems, we have many of our systems that are cloud delivered to our salespeople, to our operations teams, to our trucks. And if any one of those goes down, then we may in fact lose our ability to deliver. And I cannot, gone are the days when I can say, oh, I can just stand that up in my data center and get us back up and running. So we have to rely on our vendors. So there's the operational risk side. The other side of it is, as you've called out already, a security risk. How do we do a good job of not only evaluating them before we enter into a relationship with them, but also how do we ongoing ensure that they're maintaining an appropriate security posture? We've had more than one of our technology suppliers that are cloud delivered get attacked by ransomware and be taken offline. And so that's a significant risk to our company. So those two things, how we evaluate and manage the operational risk and how we evaluate and manage the security risk, are absolutely critical to our cloud strategy.
Wonderful. Now, if I align these risks into enabling the business strategy for IT, right? How does your business strategy support or drive the multi-cloud solution team?
We're a company, I didn't mention this in my introduction about Johnson Brothers, but we've grown significantly since I joined. We've at least $1 billion in revenue. I have to go back and look exactly since I've been here in the last 5 years, but I would say probably closer to $1.5 billion in revenue. And so with that comes a tremendous need for flexibility. Flexibility on the sales side, flexibility on integration, flexibility on how we continue to evolve our warehouse and delivery operations. So, to be able to do that, we need infrastructure that moves at the speed of business, which cloud provides for us. So to do that in our data centers, or to frankly have compute or storage at local branch facilities, is just not realistic for us to keep pace with how fast we need to move as an organization.
Wonderful. Great points, Tim. Thank you. Anil, from a deployment perspective, right, when we are especially deploying in a multi-cloud environment, we talk a lot about containers. We talk a lot about DevOps and serverless strategies and all these new era of DevOps, AI ops, everything as a service and solutions, right? How do you design a multi-cloud strategy, Anil? How did you go about doing that?
So in our case, being like a health system, right? I mean, those challenges don't manifest at the scale at which like a non-healthcare setup might, face. I think one of the areas where we had to deal with containers and the modern, cloud native architectures was when one of the major products used in a healthcare setup for analysis, they deployed a cloud enabled version. So basically a SaaS version of something that worked, let's say, on-prem. And when they deployed this product, basically they use Kubernetes, the containers, and the latest architectures, which is excellent. But the thing is, when you have to support this or deploy this, the tech talent that you need to have, the documentation that goes, it's a major struggle. So I would say, particularly when you're operating in a large organization, as compared to, let's say, a startup, your tech talent, your subject matter expertise in terms of DevOps, DevSecOps, not just DevOps, but DevSecOps, containerization, and, the tools that go with, a cloud native and modern architectures, these are all evolving, and particularly for a large organization, the risk to adopting many of these latest and greatest is very high. And, you talked about disaster recovery, business continuity management, and, and the operational risks that go with, things, the latest and greatest. So in my experience, where I've seen is basically in a non-operational or a non-critical setup, wherein you could adopt products or platforms that utilized the latest cloud native and containers and Kubernetes and other things, and you had to provide enough time to migrate over as well as build your teams, subject matter expertise, internally, and also avail of, partners and professional services from the companies that are building products on top of these cloud native architectures is the way to go for large organizations. It's a big struggle for large organizations as compared to, let's say, a startup or a mid-sized company, where you might find the talent to, do this innovative stuff.
Wonderful. Good response, Anil. Yeah. Now, deployment on a multi-cloud or even on a cloud requires a mindset change, yep. Right? Otherwise, you will have Jenkins code written like COBOL.
Yep.
Right? How did you deal with that change? How did you go about, dealing with that kind of a mindset change?
Again, I think it wasn't very hard. One of the strategies we have adopted, when we did like multi-cloud, we operate in all the major cloud environments. So one of the strategies we have adopted, which may be useful, is basically identify applications that are, you're going to deploy in these multi-cloud, right? Typically, particularly in a health system, you will not deploy a most critical clinical application directly into the cloud. That's probably, it's disaster asking to happen. So, things like research, innovation, these are the arms where we identify applications that we can deploy in the cloud. So the first approach we have taken is to build this relationship with the cloud vendor, right? You were talking about Microsoft, AWS, or Salesforce, or any of these major vendors, and build this partnership with these companies and bring in some of their professional services in-house for a short period, wherein you basically develop the best practices for deployment. And when you talk of these major cloud ecosystems, they have a full suite of continuous integration, continuous deployment, operations, all the way to a cloud environment. So you need to find what the best practices of these platforms are, and the professional services and their partners are the best entities to provide you that information. Without this, you're basically trying to build this expertise in-house without the right kind of talent. It's going to be a big struggle to make this happen, So the way we have done is basically, build the partnership with those cloud providers and bring them, with professional services and build the expertise over time, and also like kind of adapt some of your, infrastructure and monitoring and other operational things from an IT perspective that you have built over time to kind of lean into the cloud, structures you have put in place, basically.
Wonderful. You bring up a very important and valid point, right? Don't go do it all by yourselves. Get the right partner in place, right? Steve, my friend, let's go back to, see, I believe that technology is probably about 30%, and 70% of it is how you govern the entire frameworks and the strategy, right? So how do we go about governing a multi-cloud environment, whether it is, audits or your pen tests and breaches and things like that?
Yeah. Let me give you my 8-hour answer to that. That's
in 8 seconds, Steve. I know you.
Wow, what a question. So, it goes back to, I think, the core. When we go up and we talk to our board wants to understand, what is our risk profile across these multiple environments? And it's hard because, somebody else was talking earlier, I have this person using, this cloud, and another group, well, they're using different configurations. They're using different versions of software. And so, the board's given me a risk appetite, which was a long discussion. Now, how do I turn that into one profile across all of that? And that's an interesting challenge in and of itself. And so as you look at your vendors, you know, some of the things we need to do is, first of all, how do we govern, you know, can I do a pen test, or are you going to do a pen test and then give me the results? If you have an audit, what rights do I have to look at your audit results? The big one for me is, somebody else mentioned this earlier, if you have a breach or you suspect a breach, what are those notification responsibilities you have? Are you going to tell me the same time you tell the public, or are you going to tell me during the investigation? And for those of us who have been through that, you know, it can go horribly wrong. Somebody else mentioned relationships. If I've been in breaches where it immediately goes to, your lawyer has to talk to our lawyer. That's not a good situation to be in. And so you want that relationship where it's collaborative. And all this comes back to a critical point, which is, do we understand what each one of our teams have shared? What kind of data is out there? Is it proprietary company data, you know, privacy data, or public health information? You know, is it in an area where we have data localization laws? And so, like, let's say we're an international company. David, I know you feel this pain as well. You know, I've got data in Germany. Well, Germany has very specific laws about where their citizens' data can be. And so this adds so much complexity to all this. And then it all comes back to maturity of our environments. We've all built organizations where we're pretty good at tracking what's out on web pages. You know, we've got good guardrails and safety around that. APIs, most of us aren't as mature. And so you've got now, you know, you talked about this earlier, a credit card. Somebody charged your credit card. I've got a new JavaScript in my JavaScript environment that I don't know what it's doing. Somebody went out and hooked another API into something, or offered an API publicly. And so now anybody can connect to my API. Do I in security know about that? Is it vetted? Is it secure? How am I managing that? And so for me, it is about figuring out how to put that common platform in front of all of that. I don't know if that was helpful or not, but
no, it is. But, you know, adding to that, right, there is a new dimension of complexity that's coming in. You know, with the evolution of AI and RPA and all these, in fact, at least my experience has been, few of my clients said, I'm going to just drop a bot into your environment to do my work. Now, how do I credentialize that bot? And if that bot is coming from a different cloud background or from a different environment, how do I make sure that the cloud is not becoming a rogue in my environment, right? So how do you build that one risk profile, or, you know, in a zero trust environment, or, you know, in a highly regulated environment?
Yeah, and to go back to that, you know, I've got some people that want to use machine learning or AI or some automation, and everything we're talking about is automation. And it's moving at the speed of business, and it's moving at the, you know, speed of customer demand, and security now has to move at those speeds. And oh, by the way, we've been moving at those speeds for a while, because moving at the speed of our adversary, they're nimble, they're aggressive. My remediation cycle has to be inside their decision cycle. So all of that taken into account, then it goes back to a discussion with some of my developers. They want to use cloud native tools. So they're in cloud A, and you know, they have Databricks or whatever cloud A's capabilities are, and they want to use that. And then, you know, this one over here wants to do a different cloud native. Well, skill is at a premium, especially when we're talking about, you know, most of my skill sets are people managing tools. Now I need people interacting with code. It's a new skill set. It's a skill set's in high demand. You know, should I be putting one tool that's common in front of both of those? Or should I be doing, you know, double the work in cloud native? And those are the discussions we're having with our business partners, is what's the right balance? And what standard are we going to set for, again, even if they're on the same platform, are they on the same version and same, risk profile? Are they both in deny, or is one in monitor and one in deny? And I think that's where we have to work very closely with our business partner. We in security don't accept risk. We advise and make sure they understand the risks they're taking. And if we get our senior leaders to agree on a risk profile, then I think we can enforce that. So it's how much do they want to invest and where do they want to standardize on that risk profile is where I think I put most of my energy.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Steve. David, let's get back to you, right? If you take the, you're in R&D space, and, what it requires is the ideation and the innovation of ideas, or, from ideation to implementation for, if you take that entire cycle, how are you leveraging technology in this day of age, especially, if you look at the pre-pandemic era and the post-pandemic era? How are you leveraging technology to minimize those cycles and deliver better, faster, cheaper, and secure?
I think about this for a while there. I'm going to say maybe 3 years ago, let's just put that as a marker. A lot of the folks that were fairly new to this game of leveraging the cloud for increased value for customers were like, well, I need to do AI. I went from, well, I'm doing things on spreadsheets to now I have to do it all in AI. And they skip, if you will, the whole progression of, well, let's do data, let's do analytics, let's, and so on, which is not a bad thing because it created that incentive to say, well, if I want to do AI, then I've got to do all these other things to get ready to do AI that brings value. And so we essentially went really quickly and then had to take a step back and actually map out how we were going to essentially build up this capability to deploy these, I would say, cloud first kinds of mindsets and technologies into the R&D community. And it's always been best to have, as we all know, to have a strong business/customer pull, whether that customer is a paying customer or a large organization. And our biggest pull, if you will, was to try to transform the way we do materials research at 3M. It is a very long cycle process. And so if we can use advanced modeling, advanced machine learning, advanced analytics to essentially see patterns that were invisible before. So that incentive was really our biggest opportunity, that carrot, to enable our researchers to essentially say, I've got to learn how to take this data and get out of my spreadsheets and get into the, what the kids are using.
Wonderful. Thank you, David.
Doug, I think time is up, but what a great session. Amazing job. Do you want to do final comments?
Sure, yes. In fact, I was under the impression I had time till 2:50. Come on.
We started 10 minutes early.
That's fine. It's okay. No, what a great discussion this is. I'm sure we can go for the entire day if we need to. But hey, thank you very much, David, Daniel, Tim, and Steve, for your insights and your multi-cloud journeys. And it was a pleasure speaking with each one of you. Thank you. Thank you very much, Hunter. Back to you.
We were 10 minutes ahead, actually, so we were you got a head start on this. Thank you very much, Doug. Great job, David, Tim, Anil, Steve. Awesome job. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Really excited so much for everyone that was engaged. Big shout out to Trix as well as Fortinet. Please, when they reach out to you, take a 20-minute call. Support the event, support the theme, digital theme summits, as well as our in-person summits. Big shout out again to SIM Minnesota. Great partnering with you. Thank you so much for what a great partnership going on over 5-7 years. We'll look forward to seeing you in person in the fall. Next week, Tuesday, we have a SASE Digital Theme Summit, 1 to 3, I believe. Check that out on the HMG website. It's nothing like secure access at the edge. And then as well, again, live in person in New York, April 4th and 5th, Dallas 6th and 7th, Silicon Valley 20th, April 20th and 21st. So, hey, stay with HMG Strategies, stay with us and stay with Hunter. Great job, folks. Great job to the HMG team as well. Thanks so much, and take care and be safe.
For more information, please visit hmgstrategy.com and keep up to date by following us on our social media platforms. Thank you. This has been a presentation of HMG Live.